Hello everyone, this is Mega Man. This is Mega Man Rock Force Reviewed, and what I'm basically doing here is I'm gonna mention pretty much my overall thoughts of the game. I'm probably not gonna mention everything, every little detail that I enjoyed because, well, that's gonna take a huge boatload of time. So anyhow, the first thing I wanna do in the review is something that I'm not so sure if I've ever shown in any of my actual videos. If you select this options right here, and then you get this kind of screen amongst others, you actually get to choose several awesome settings, such as, for example, how many lives you have, how much spike damage is done, the damage recoil, the amount of checkpoints you have, and the slide strength. And to be honest, actually giving that much selection to the player in terms of the mechanics is very amazing. I mean, the mechanics for the most part seem like a natural Mega Man game should, but depending on which options you have. But the fact they can actually choose stuff like recovery time, slide strength, and damage recoil. I mean, I can imagine there are situations where you'd want some to be higher than others, and vice versa. And to be honest, the fact that the player gives you a choice before you start the game, how much of each you would like, that is honestly a very awesome. That's very. That's honestly very awesome, and that seriously gives the player a sense of choosing whether whether or not you. I mean, you're not. I mean, of course, this does seem a bit more novel, but It's honestly very interesting how this attention to detail was put into even the mechanics of the game. Of course, the actual stage designs, and I mean, I'm not going to get into every single one, but in general, most of them it seemed like realistic places and places that would be thematically appropriate to the robot masters. I mean, in addition, they all incorporated some sorts of gimmicks. I mean, and some sorts of thematically appropriate enemies, and so that actually made the stage distinguishable and really made the stage feel like its own. In addition, the intro stage, I have to say, was a pretty interesting choice since it actually got the players reviewed and comfortable with the mechanics of the game, such as, for example, the fact that you need to know how to slide, how to jump, how to shoot. Pretty basic stuff, but it does what an intro stage should be doing. Also, the boss, Shockman, he's a pretty interesting. He's a pretty easy boss at the intro stage, and he can seem a tiny bit harder in the actual boss battle later on, but not really. As for the actual initial eight Robot Master stages, they're all honestly all very interesting concepts. I mean, they all seem like fresh ideas. You, they're pretty. And what's also interesting is the plot of the is how they all are incorporated with saving a member of the Rock Force, who and they all seem to have some sort of appropriate thematic relation to the stage and or the Robot Master. I mean, and also interesting how whenever you beat any of the initial eight, it actually tied in with the plot more about robot freedom and how instead of just defeating the Robot Master and getting a weapon, you're actually saving one of your fellow brothers in the Rock Force, and that honestly that honestly gives the player a greater sense of accomplishment when they defeat a Robot Master. It honestly makes it seem like there's a bigger reason to have defeated the Robot Master than just, oh, you're causing havoc, that means I must destroy you. Though, to be honest, that does somewhat tie in with the plot of the game, considering that in the end, Dr. Light mentions that the reason Mega Man had to destroy them was because they apparently were influenced, perhaps initially by Shockman, who influenced Justice Man, though the other eight could also have been uprising. Apparently, it's not completely revealed why, though. So there's that sense of mystery, but there's still a sense of solidified sense of plot that that robots want freedom, but unfortunately, according to human ethics, humans can't really get all that freedom that they want. And so Mega Man must, as the as the human guard or as the human save robot, must do what humanity needs to do and destroy the robots who are having the free will. Of course, the way it was presented in the game does honestly make it seem a bit more emotionally attachable to the player. I mean, to be honest, when I first saw the ending of the Mega Man Rock Force, I was honestly both shocked that A, Dr. Wily didn't really have anything to do with the plot, and B, sad that apparently Mega Man had to destroy robots just because they wanted freedom, but the world was not ready to give robots their own freedom, considering that Mega Man had to destroy his own brother, Justice Man, just because he turned berserk or so some people would say, and Justice Man was leading an uprising again for robots to have their own path. To be honest, though, that on my personal opinion on that is that it only causes more chaos than good. And while I don't want to seem too controversial here, I'm just saying that giving emotions and free will to things that don't normally have them is generally going to really cause some problems, considering if they feel the negative emotions or if they choose the negative choices, it's not really going to help people as much as it's going to hurt them. So, and I don't want to get too controversial here, but that's my original idea. But in any case, back to the stages. I mean, what's something interesting about the stages is how after you beat the initial 8, each of them they all combine to form 4 new Robot Masters that somewhat seem to have stages that are related to 4 of the originals, and yet at the same time they all feel like unique levels. Like, for example, I could tell that that Flare Man's stage was in fact very influenced on Fuse Man's stage, but at the very same time, it felt like its own unique stage. I mean, same with the other stages. Unfortunately, you don't really get any Robot Master weapons from them, but alas, it does feel like an interesting stage. I mean, it feels like it's there mostly for the challenge, and I'm not so sure if there was any good plot behind it, but I guess the best thing I can come up with plot is that the robots were so determined for their freedom that even after Mega Man destroyed them, they still wanted to fight back, and so they combined their powers to recreate 4 new Robot Masters. And then even after that happened, they recombined into Deathman. Well, I honestly thought it was a pretty macabre concept, considering that they all had to die twice, and then they're combining into Deathman. To be honest, that stage in particular is requiring of some special attention, mainly because the game is short and sweet, and there's not really much more enemies around for that. And the main theory there is that Mega Man in his quest also had to destroy the minor enemies before getting to all of the Robot Masters, and the theory was that either there's none left that are willing to fight, or that it was strategically thought that Mega Man would only be obstructed by them, and so they weren't sent to suffer. But then after Mega Man defeats Deathman, it's then revealed that Justice Man was indeed not just kidnapped, but he was indeed responsible for part of the robot uprisings. And so that was an interesting plot twist, and it really surprised me before we discovered that it was Justice Man's fortress here. It's an interesting fortress design too, considering the main concept that I mentioned. It's not just covered in skulls like Wily, but And it also seems more obviously related, for example, I guess maybe Cossack's Citadel from Mega Man 4 being covered in all the onion domes did seem to relate to Russian architecture, but other than that, it's really a bit of a stretch between that and Cossack. But Justice Man's Fortress, on the exterior, it seemed very interesting, but it was also interesting how in the interior there's three different stages. One of them is related to the exterior, but then you have Fishman and Polar Man, both of which are very interesting concepts, and it's very interesting how even in the fortress stages you have robot masters fighting. I'm guessing these were two that were special, that were somehow especially more powerful or such, mainly because they had their extra robot assists. But that's an interesting concept how in the fortress stages you had these special double battles where you had two boss fights on end. It does add to the challenge a good bit, and for each one a different reason. But then that happened, and yet with two different, completely different stages that are still fresh and new that give the game a bit more novelty. And unlike most fortress stages in Mega Man games, these fortress stages, knowing that they had bosses with masters, they actually seemed thematically appropriate towards one interesting theme. I mean, they could actually understand where the inspiration for any of these came from. It wasn't just random. And also, yeah, and also we get to Justice Man's final chamber, which is an honestly interesting design considering that it actually, instead of just having you going through and just refighting the Robot Masters, it had you go back through the stage gimmicks of each of the Robot Master stages, or at least one of them for each stage. And to be honest, that was somewhat of a bit of a challenge, mainly with Virus Man because of that one jump that requires rather speedy timing, and Circuit Man if you're trying to do it without the rush coil. But other than that, it's honestly pretty interesting and pretty easy. I mean, the entire game was not very difficult, and I'm not complaining. I mean, to be honest, you probably know this by now, but I'm not very good at playing Mega Man games, or and so there's something that's pretty easy makes it a bit more enjoyable. I mean, I still enjoy the mainstream games, though the challenge does frustrate me a good deal. Seeing this easy relief Mega Man Raw Force, it's really an interesting choice how it's a bit easier than the rest of the games, and so I personally got to enjoy more of the actual gameplay. I mean, I enjoy a good challenge, but at the same time, not too much challenge, and this game really gave me this game really was enjoyable. I mean, there were some problem spots, I admit, and to be honest, in terms of difficulty, there were some difficult spots that seemed a bit cheap when they were difficult. I think that would mainly be because of the fact that the player isn't really used to having such difficult spots when they're introduced. And so there is that regard. However, in any case, the game was pretty much most part easy but fun. It was a fun kind of easy, and I personally enjoyed it a lot. I mean, to be honest, not even the bosses were pretty easy. I mean, there were some exceptions to that, and you can probably tell that by my reactions to each Robot Master battle. But overall, this is a pretty awesome game, and that's pretty much all I have to say for it for now. I'm still trying to decide what games I should do next. But while that's happening, this is On the Fistulum signing out. Arrivederci!